Hello, how are you? I hope that you're well. Today I want to talk to you about how to make your language practice worthwhile because there's loads of things that we can do to make things just a little bit more, a little bit more elevated, a bit more effective, and that's what we're going to talk about today. First up, before we get into everything, if you want to make your language practice more worthwhile, one of the best ways is with language prompts, because when you speak more, when you write more, you get fluent promptly. And that's why my prompt subscription is called Promptly. Ta-da! So details are in the description. I'll pop a thing up here as well, and I'll tell you more at the end. Okay, let's get into everything. So more language practice is always going to be a good thing, right? But that on its own is really terrible advice to just say, do more. Like, okay, more what, when, how, why? It's just not enough explanation. And there is something I feel that when we hear do more makes us kind of want to retreat sometimes, of like, oh, more sounds like effort, it sounds like work. And if that's how you feel about your language learning, about your practice, then it is going to feel like work, it is going to be effort, and it isn't going to be all that fun and effective, to be quite honest. So one of the ways that we can make language practice more worthwhile is by actually producing something that we want to review. Now, what I mean by that is that when you're writing, when you're speaking, not so much when you're consuming, right? That stuff, you're taking stuff in, you're probably already taking stuff in mostly to do with your interests. But when it comes to the production side of things, the writing and the speaking, it's not always the same case. But it should be, because if you've got something that you've written or that you've spoken and you actually want to review it, you want to go back to it, you want to check it for feedback, then you've just doubled the value of your language practice, which is something pretty impressive and something that we should all be looking to be doing, so that we have this tool. Essentially, we've just created a resource for ourselves. That's what we've done when we've made language practice that we want to review. We've made a resource for ourselves, for our future language selves. But this stage then, this review, especially if we take this as an idea of self-review, what does that look like? How do we even begin? Okay, I'm going to talk you through some of the steps. First up then, to create practice that you actually want to review, to make your practice more worthwhile, set a focus. And that could be a meaning focus, a learning focus, or a fluency focus. And within each of those, there's room for more detail and more nuance as well. And this doesn't need to be a big decision every single time before you sit down of like, what am I going to do today? It's like, it takes up the whole time that you've allocated for your languages, and then oof, you've got to move on. Life calls, you've got something else to do. No, this is just like a snap decision every single time. So those three focuses then, what do they mean? Well, with a meaning focus, your primary goal here, your core aim that you want to happen is for your meaning to be understood, for you to communicate, essentially, right? That's when you have a meaning focus. So what that means is that there will be mistakes, because you're not all that worried about making mistakes. You're not all that worried about fluency. That's a different focus. You're not necessarily learning anything new here, right? That's a learning focus. Instead, we just want to be understood. That's the meaning focus that we're going for. Second up, we have the fluency focus. And this one in particular can really be broken down into different nuances. So it could be that you're going for fluency in terms of accuracy and not making mistakes, right? And that would then be slightly different sometimes from going for fluency in terms of fluidity and flow, because there probably will be a few mistakes, right? So there's nuance there within that fluency focus. And finally, learning focus is a practice that you do when you are specifically wanting to review or practice something that you've just learned. So let's say that you've just read about a new grammar thing in the textbook and you want to make sure that you've understood it. And when you're practicing, you're using that thing. That's a learning focus. And of course, with each of these, it's great if the others are happening. It's great if you have a meaning focus, and as well as that, it's also fluent, right? And maybe you get some new vocab in there too. Equally, it's great if you've got a fluency focus and you understood. That's helpful. And you maybe get to practice something new too. Also good. And you get the idea, right? But if we're trying to do all of that in one go with just one practice, that's when we start to trip up, and that's when things get slower. So if you're aiming for more effective practice and practice that you want to review, this really helps as the first point, because when it then comes to that review, we know what the focus is, so we know what things we can be really specifically looking for in the review, because then at the review stage, if we don't do that, we end up with the same feeling, that same feeling of overwhelm, of like, poof, what do I do? Where do I begin? So we have the focus now. It helps us in the review stage. A non-intimidating length. So if you are in the habit from like school days of your writing practice needing to be essays long and your speaking needing to be at least 3 minutes, and then you're thinking, why do I never go back and review this? That is why, because it's far too long. No one wants to sit down and listen to themselves back and forth for 3 whole minutes. No one wants to sit down and review pages that they've written about something, and if they've not picked a good topic, about something that maybe isn't that interesting. So we have to think, what is a non-intimidating length when I'm thinking about self-review? And that's not to say that you can't write essays, you can't do long speaking recordings. Of course you can, and you should. But for the things that you intentionally want to go back to and review, that's when perhaps you want to be thinking about, okay, what is a good length for me to want to return to this and not feel like, oh, this is going to be a slog to review. And on this point too, make sure that the time you've sort of allowed yourself for self-review is roughly in line with what you're expecting to review in that time, right? And have a bit of self-compassion here. If you're thinking, okay, I've only got 10 minutes, I'm going to do some self-review of what I've written, and the thing that you've written most recently is a big long essay, don't beat yourself up if you don't get that whole thing reviewed in just 10 minutes. Like, if you think, okay, I'm going to just start with 1 paragraph, and I'm going to really go through with a specific focus. Remember the focus at the beginning? Now we have a focus for the review too. What's my focus for checking on this, first of all? And then you can maybe do more if you have time, but you've zoomed in a little bit. We're not just thinking, oh, I need to do the whole thing in a really short space of time. So just be kind to yourself on that. Topics that interest you. So of course, this one feels like the obvious, right? It feels like it goes without saying that when you involve things that you enjoy in your language learning, it's going to be more fun, it's going to be more functional, it's going to be better and easier, right? Obviously. But it's not always how things turn out in practice. So it's always worth reminding that, like, if you're making, especially because here we're talking about making practice that you want to review, if you've written a text about something really just not interesting to you, you're not going to want to go back and revisit that in the same way as if it's something that like really has captured your attention and you want to make sure that you're saying it all right. Do you see where I'm coming from? And this isn't just in the sense of, okay, so only write about things that you love, right? It's also maybe the opposite of that. So like, what about things that you hate, that you have like a sort of more visceral reaction to, and things that you can say about? It's not just the love side of things. And I'll give you an example. So cats, right? I'm really not a cat person. I don't like the way they do this when they walk on you. I don't like the way that they feel like they're always plotting to kind of destroy you. I don't know, don't like cats. And also I'm mostly allergic to cats as well. It obviously kind of works in the favor of not liking cats. But I have things to say about cats. Whereas something like, I don't know, rabbits, like as a pet, okay, whatever. I don't have a rabbit. I don't know anyone that has a rabbit. It's not like a thing in my life. So I'm less likely to want to review the text that I kind of wrote about rabbits, not really caring, versus the text that I wrote about cats that I don't like, but that I do have things to say about. So when I say topics that interest you, it's topics that interest you that get you talking as well, not necessarily just the things that you love. And finally, don't rely on translation too much. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with language practice where you are relying on translation tools, where you do have Google Translate open, you've got the dictionary there, you've got your vocab list that you're picking up from. That's all fine. But when we know that we want to do self-review, that's less fine. And again, it's to do with how much time it's going to take us for that self-review. Because if we have to look up, 60% of the words in a sentence, when we're doing it, when we're writing it down for the first time or speaking it aloud for the first time, when it comes to review, chances are we're not going to remember all 60% of those words. So we need to look them up again to make sure that we've done it right. You see where I'm coming from? So to keep things kind of streamlined and easier for yourself, don't rely too much on translation in the practice stage if you know that you want to self-review, because you can always do that translation and that checking in the self-review. So trying to kind of stick to what you know, work around what you can't say just yet with, thinking about like, okay, this is the word, the sort of wall, and you want to go around that word that you don't yet know. Of course, you could look it up with a second, or you could get really sort of thoughtful with the language and thinking more about, okay, well, I know that it is, let's say it's hairbrush. I know that it is a thing to tidy hair, and maybe that will be enough for them when you're in the review stage to think, oh yeah, I didn't know how to say the word hairbrush. Or you could even highlight, you could do whatever, but don't rely too much on translation. You can do that in the review stage. And there we go. So if you're thinking, how can I make my language practice worthwhile? I want to review, I don't really know how to do the next bit. How do I do the self-review bit? I've just added a brand new workshop to Promptly, which is all about this. It's how to self-review. So we'll go into everything that you need to know for various levels, various stages of your language learning, and for different situations in general, like how much time you have and all of these things, what your goals are, so that everything fits. Like, by now, right? I'm not about a sort of one-size-fits-all model, because that's not how we learn languages, and that's very, very unhelpful. So that's not what this is. Right? So how to self-review, brand new workshop in Promptly. Promptly is a subscription that is just $10 a month, or you can pay annually for $100 and save 2 months. You get 2 months for free if you pay on the annual plan. And yeah, I'm adding in the workshop to make sure that you can really be making the most of Promptly, because in Promptly, what you get every single week is a brand new writing and speaking prompt to inspire a bit of production. It's really easy to consume, to read stuff, to listen to stuff, but to actually do the writing and the speaking practice that we need to be ready to speak fluently, it can be a little intimidating sometimes, or a bit boring. And so it's really easy to put off. So Promptly helps you not put that off, right? So you get that new prompt every single week. And then with the prompt, you also get suggestions to use this at different levels. So rather than just, here, prompt, on you go. You also get ideas for like, well, what can I do if I'm a beginner, if I'm an intermediate, if I'm advanced in the language I'm learning? What would work best to take this prompt and really make it something worthwhile for me? And then you get a video walkthrough. So again, I'm not just leaving you high and dry with those suggestions either. You get a video walkthrough of me going into more detail, giving you that bit of further sort of spark of inspiration if you need it for what to do for that prompt. And every single prompt can be used like so many times because they're just so versatile. That's just how they work. So yeah, have a look. The link is in the description. It is up here as well. If you're interested, I highly recommend that you join Promptly so that you can make your language practice worthwhile, and you can do that self-review with that brand new workshop that's just been added into the subscription too. All right, if you have any questions, let me know down below, or you can email me, lindsay@doeslanguages.com. Thank you very much. Subscribe, like, all of those things, and I will see you very soon. Bye.